Good morning, everyone. Warm welcome to the Arafura and TimorLeste Ecosystem Action Phase 2 or ATSEA-2, the Stakeholders Partnership Forum webinar series, Building a Better ATS for Tomorrow. First, I would like to extend a warm welcome to the members of Regional Steering Committee, representatives from Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and Australia, and for all participants, wherever you are from around the world, welcome. Thank you for joining us today through the Zoom meeting or through live streaming on YouTube channel. And I really hope that everything's going really well with everyone in these challenging times. So first of all, allow me to introduce myself. I am Dinah. I have been working in the area of marine policy and ocean management for quite some time. Currently, I am working for the Indonesian Ministry of Marine Affairs and Fisheries, particularly on marine spatial planning. I also manage a small initiative on marine conservation and community empowerment in Banda Islands, Indonesia, and I also actively participate in the Women Leaders Forum of Coral Triangle Initiative. And it is an honor for me to be the moderator for today's webinar. So this consultative webinar series from Monday until today mainly aims to present the ATSEA program initial findings and challenges, also to get feedback and suggestion from you all for the future of ATSEA-2 program. In the last 3 days, from Monday until yesterday, we already discussed about governance mechanism, climate change, biodiversity protection, marine and land-based pollution, moderated by my dear colleagues, 3 amazing women. While today, we will have a discussion on the topic of sustainable fisheries. We will have presentation from 2 amazing speakers, and then continued by some comments from our panelists. We're also gonna have a Q&A session, a quiz with the prize for sure. And at the end, there will be also the announcement of the quote competition winners that we already ran the competition from Monday until yesterday. And until now, you can still post your quote and be the winner. So before we start our webinar today, there is some meeting guidelines so that this webinar can run smoothly. First, the host will mute all participants during the webinar, and all participants kindly rename themselves as name_institution or name_country. And if you have any question during the speaker's presentation, you can type your questions on the Zoom chat box or on the YouTube live chat. You can also click the raise hand button during the Q&A session later, and I will call your attention. So this all for the housekeeping rules, and also there is more information about the quiz and the quote competition. So for the quiz, we're gonna have that at the end of our webinar. There will be 2 questions and there will be prize for 2 winners. So be sure that you participate on the quiz later. And about the quote competition, we still have the quote competition until 10:30. Okay, you can see on the screen that you can post your favorite quote from the webinar series. For example, maybe you find useful or interesting information from the speaker's presentation. You can post it. Just simply post 1 or 2 quotes in your social media account through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and just use the hashtag ATSEA-2 to win the exclusive merchandise from the ATSEA project. There will be 2 winner categories, the best quote and the most liked post. Okay, and the winners will be announced later today. So don't forget to grab your phone, share your quotes, and win the prize. And I would also remind you, all participants, there will be a link for questionnaire will be shared on the chat box by the committee regarding the ATSEA-2 Stakeholders Partnership Forum. So these questionnaires allow you to provide feedback for the ATSEA project and the Stakeholder Partnership Forum. So if you can fill up the questionnaire, it will be very great and we thank you for that. Okay, I believe that some of you may already know about the ATSEA-2 project, but to make it clearer, at present, I would like to invite Mr. Gerson Alves from the National Coordinating Unit TimorLeste to explain about the ATSEA-2 project. Please, Mr. Alves.
All right. Thank you very much, Ms. Dinah, for the time. Okay. I think before I start with the brief presentation about the ATSEA, I would like to say very good morning for all representatives from the Arafura and Timor Sea countries and all participants. I also would like to introduce here with us at UNDP Timor-Leste. We have about 30 students from UNTL, Department of Marine Fishery and Marine Science, and also Livestock and Animal Science. And also here with us, Dr. Abilio and Dr. Matthias, and also Mr. Walter. They have been with us since the first day until the last day today. And that, thank you for coming to our Stakeholder Partnership Forum. Consultative webinar today, 4 November 2020, which will bring us to the end of a 4-day consecutive webinar jointly organized by Regional Project Management Unit and National Coordination Unit. I'm Gerson Alves, National Coordinator for ATSEA Timor-Leste. And I think I will start by playing a 3-minute video animation to give you an insight of what ATSEA-2 is all about.
The Arafura and Timor Seas region, or ATS, is unique in terms of its ecology, geography, and socio-political structure. It is rich in resources and home to a vast array of natural wonders. Shared by Australia, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and Timor-Leste, this fertile corridor of tropical water connects the Pacific and Indian Oceans. This area provides the peoples of many nations with essential resources, while also stocking the world's oceans with biodiversity. Unfortunately, overfishing, marine and land-based pollution, loss of habitat, and the impacts of climate change create a major threat to most marine life in the region. This underlines the urgent need for a collective regional action and transboundary management of economically important fish species, critical habitats, and marine megafauna. Therefore, in 2006, the ATS Expert Forum developed and submitted a bid to the Global Environment Facility, which came to be known as the Arafura and Timor Seas Ecosystem Action Program, or ATSEA. The initial phase was officially launched in 2010 and created a regional collaboration tasked with finding sustainable solutions for problems affecting coastal and marine resources in the region. In 2019, the second phase of ATSEA, known as ATSEA-2, has been adapted to take the collaboration and coordination in the ATS region a step further through the endorsement and implementation of a 10-year vision for the ATS, known as the Strategic Action Program. It is made up of three main components. The first component focuses on strengthening the regional and national collaboration mechanism and establishing a stakeholder partnership forum to facilitate implementation of priority actions and better participatory processes. The second component focuses on developing an ecosystem approach to the fisheries management plan, strengthening the implementation of regional plan of action to combat IUU fishing, assessing marine and land-based pollution, establishing and supporting the management of marine protected areas, and developing a regional plan to enhance marine turtle protection. And the third component focuses on improving the monitoring of the ATS region and sharing knowledge gained from the project. Through the three components, ATSEA-2 aims to achieve its main objectives in the ATS to foster sustainable development in the region by improving the quality of life of its inhabitants through restoration, conservation, and sustainable management of marine coastal ecosystems for a better life.
Yes, that's the video. I hope that the video animation give you enough understanding about ATSEA-2 program. That show our regional effort to reduce increased transboundary issue resulting from growing in our coastal development scope, including population growth along with climate change issue. From this slide, it shows the Arafura and Timor Sea border by Australia, Indonesia, and Timor-Leste, and Papua New Guinea. The project is actually covering the following specific site where key project activity will be undertaken to address the 5 major transboundary issues identified in the transboundary diagnostic analysis. As you can see from the site, in Indonesia, it is in Rotenandau of I think it is Nusa Tenggara province, Maroke of Papua province, and Aru of Maluku province. In Timor-Leste, the site will be in Bikeke. It is small, but it shows Bikeke, Manatutu, Povalima, and Lautem, where our Suai, and Lautem, where the national first national park was declared. That is the Ninu Koni Santana National Park. And in Papua New Guinea, it shows the South Fly district in Western province. And in the left, you can see that the 5 major transboundary issue was the unsustainable fishery, modification, degradation, loss of habitat, marine and land-based pollution, climate change impact, and also loss of key species. Those are the 5 major issues that was brought up in the transboundary diagnostic analysis. Next slide, please. Next, yeah. The project has a 5 years time frame and will be implemented under 3 major components within 9 target outcomes and 23 target outputs. As you can see, overall intervention under this component are aimed to contribute to enhance the development of Arafura and Timor-Leste region toward a more sustainable way. Next slide, please. This is the Stakeholder Partnership Forum. This slide shows you with a brief information about Stakeholder Partnership Forum, or SPF, that we are going to establish under ATSEA-2 program. We have learned from the SPF in the first day of our webinar, where presented by our speaker, Dr. Tony Wage and Dr. Lila Per. As you have learned from previous presentation, that SPF of ATSEA-2 was building on the knowledge and experience from the former ATS Expert Forum, or ATSEF, under ATSEA Phase 1. Therefore, the ATSEA-2 project is paving the way for more inclusivity by strengthening participatory mechanism in ATS governance. This will be done through the engagement of a broader range of stakeholders in the region. As you have also learned that members of SPF will come from key stakeholder groups of government, civil society, community group, NGOs, women's organizations, private sector, local government, academic, and scientific institutions. As such, SPF is built to facilitate a deeper engagement of stakeholders as important partners in addressing region major transnational issues to achieve sustainable development goals through implementation of strategic action program and national action program in each of ATS countries. The objective of the SPF webinar is, as you know, that SPF will be established by early next year. And the objective of this webinar is to actually to present the ATSEA program and overview of the challenge of the ATS region. It also aims to present the initial finding, get feedback, suggestions, and on several studies conducted by our experts at regional and local level. It is also to present SPF as part of ATS regional government mechanism, its objective and rules of the potential members. Next slide. This slide shows you the overall 4 days of our webinar series. The first, we will talk about introduction of SPF and ongoing assessment of regional governance mechanism. The second day was on climate change, vulnerability assessment, marine and land pollution. The third day was about NPA network and marine cultural study. And the fourth day, which is today, we are going to uncover important information on why to sustain economic system service in ATS region, focusing on sustainable fishery, and observe the trend of IUU fishing and how it has contributed to unsustainable fishery in ATS region. There's two important sessions will be presented by Dr. Arie Afriansyah and Dr. Knuckey will be facilitated by, as you know, Ms. Dinah from CTI-CFF Women Leadership Forum. Next slide. So this slide actually show you briefly the key activity related to sustainable fishery that will be implemented in the 3 ATS countries. As you can see, by implementing those mentioned key activity related to sustainable fishery, it is expected that by the end of the project in all 3 countries, number of management plan and appropriate measure implemented for a building of protecting fish stock, including alternative management approach. Number of target community of fishers have adopted ecosystem approach to fishery management. Reduce fishing pressure, particularly in Aru, Indonesia, and South Fly District, PNG. And also improve use of fish gear or technique to reduce turtle by catch, including for shrimp, red snapper, barramundi fishery in Aru, Indonesia. In South Coast Timor-Leste, we hope that the increase in percentage vessel within the red snapper fishery using improved gear or technique. And also in South Fly, PNG, percentage of artisanal fishery using improved gear or techniques. We are very grateful to have many prominent scientists and experts who have shared their valuable thought, insight, knowledge in the past 3 days. And more will speak today at the last day of our webinar series. We hope that this event will be useful for all of us in our endeavors to improve marine and fishery resource management in Arafura and Timor-Leste. Once again, I would like to inform you all that we are carrying out a survey related to our communication approach to establish the FCF. So I encourage you to join the survey, which will become your significant contribution to a better ATS for tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alves, for such a clear explanation about the ATSEA-2 project, the Stakeholder Partnership Forum, and also you mentioned about some key activities on sustainable fisheries, including IUU Fishing and ecosystem approach to fisheries management, the two topics that will be presented by our amazing speakers next. So now we will have our first speaker, Dr. Arie Afriansyah. Arie Afriansyah is an expert on international law, including international environmental law and the law of the sea. He is a senior lecturer at the Faculty of Law, University of Indonesia, and currently he is also the chairman of the Center for International Law Studies and also Center for Sustainable Ocean Policy. He is also the editor-in-chief of Indonesian Journal of International Law, and he is also the president of the Indonesian Society of International Law Lecturers and the executive member of the Asian Society of International Law. He obtained his bachelor from the University of Indonesia, his master on environmental law from the University of Sydney, and his doctoral degree from the University of Otago, New Zealand. And at present, Pak Arie will talk about IUU Fishing baseline studies. And I would remind you that all participants can type your questions on the Zoom chat box or YouTube live chat during Pak Arie presentation, or you can save it later for the Q&A session. So, good morning, Pak Arie. Are you there?
Yeah, good morning, Mbak Dinah.
Okay. How are you, Pak?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Please, Pak, you have 20 minutes. I will remind you on your last 2 minutes. The floor is yours, Pak Arie.
Okay, thank you very much, Mbak Dinah. A very good morning to everyone. I would like to say thank you for the ATSEA-2 program who just invited me as one of the consultants. And I would like to say thank you to Dr. Ian as my fellow presenters, and also for the commentators, Dr. Luky, he's one of my mentors, and also Mr. Aleixo. I'm looking forward for your comments. So, ladies and gentlemen, this morning, I would like to share with you some of my findings in which it is an ongoing research, as ongoing working in progress. About the title is about the strengthening regional and national actions in support of combating IUU fishing. As you heard from the moderator about my background, of course, I'll be looking at mostly on the legal issue or regulation respond to this issue. So my presentation will be outlined as follow. First, I would like to share with you some background in which it has been provided by the very nice 3-minute video. And also, I would like to share why it is important to combat IUU fishing. And I would like to share with you some of my findings of the national legal responses, specifically from the countries in the area of Arafura and Timor-Sea. And then I would like to also to share with you our effort to provide an update of the baseline estimates of the loss of the IUU fishing that occurred in the area. And then lastly, I would like to share with you the way forward of this working in progress will be developed in the future. As you have seen from the video, the area of Arafura and Timor-Sea has so much importance, not only for the littoral states, but also for the surroundings, because as part of the ocean in general, the Arafura and Timor-Sea area has shared its importance, including the natural resources and including the wider issue of their biodiversity. And as mentioned before, since the area is shared by mainly 4 littoral states, Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Australia, and Papua New Guinea, then it is imperative, for the 4 countries to work together to conserve and maintain these very rich natural resources. However, as also mentioned by the video, there are some threats to this area. And one of the threats is the IUU fishing, in which it creates a danger or damage to the natural resources, mostly on fisheries, that might lead to other damages, to the ecosystem. In which that you may have found the definition of the IUU fishing itself. It's so broad, but the most real thing that we can see is about the illegal fishing. We have known that number of action and legal response has been implemented by the 4 states, and also in general worldwide. So again, in facing this threat and also to combating the issue of IUU fishing, it is imperative to have a joint management effort. As you can see from the picture here from the satellite imagery, the white spots shows that the numbers of vessels that are having an activity in the area. So I took this from the Global Fishing Watch, fishing vessel activities in the ATS region between April and September 2020. So we can see in that area so much activities, of course, capturing fish and so on, and it shows area have rich resources, and some says it is called also as a golden fishing area. Based on the FAO statistics in 2017, both Eastern Indian Ocean on the left side, and also on the Western Central Pacific, which is some part of the ATS is located, are among the highest producers. In which it is calculated more than almost 7 million and more than 12 million tons per year, respectively. And also in the area, it is located where the mangroves are located with the high density. In addition to that, Indonesia, as the archipelagic countries, have this obligation to provide the archipelagic sea lanes as a compromise to the international navigation. And these archipelagic sea lanes provide the international navigation, any types of vessels that can pass through the Indonesian archipelagic waters. And then one of the sea lanes, which is the third branch of sea branch, that is passing through the Arafura and Timor Sea. And this might be also became one of the threats, prone threats to the ecosystem, because as we all know that the operation and the passage of these vessels can be a real danger to the ecosystem. If we take a look in the last year, here I take a look between July, December 2019, and between January to June 2020 from the Global Fishing Watch, we can see that all year long, this area has never been quiet. Even the activity, we can say, is constantly visited by many fishing vessels. Therefore, the management of the natural resources, especially the threats that coming from the IUU fishing, is even more important than ever. And because of this IUU fishing, we can identify a number of impacts that I categorize to three categories. The first one is environment, the social, and the economic. So from this, the FAO in 2018 reported that more than 30% of the fish stock has been overexploited. And the significant damage to the reproduction cycle physically destroyed the coral reefs. And in longer term, not only the fish scarce due to the depletion of fish stock, but also marine ecosystem can no longer compromise typical ecosystem functioning for the fish to reproduce. Whereas socially, because of this IUU fishing, it engaged more than 50 million people that engage in this primary of capture fisheries. The impacts were directed to many people due to the decrease in the number of small-scale and artisanal fishers whose livelihoods relied heavily on the natural resource offshore. And the IUU fishing undermines efforts from the legitimate fishermen, which will promote irresponsible extraction of the fishery resources. And lastly, it impedes sea safety while promoting criminal action and abuse of human rights, because in addition to the fish crime itself, we will know that there are a number of crimes that related to fishery. And lastly, for the economic category, UNEP estimate that the loss of annual revenues between 11 and 30 billion US dollar globally. And countries with a high level of IUU fishing will most likely experience trade sanctions, as we know that the EU now has provide a labeling of IUU fishing, so that the trade of fishing becoming even more difficult. And the depleted biodiversity and destroyed marine ecosystem due to the IUU fishing also negatively impact the tourism sector, in which relied by small island countries, including Indonesia, TimorLeste, and Papua New Guinea, and also Australia. In here, we know that, of course, fish consumption has reached more than 150 million tons per year, based on the literature written in 2017. And the management of the fisheries resources shall take in place to sustain a healthy fisheries resource and ensure food security, alleviate poverty, and optimize the economic value for the benefits of the people. And especially for the three countries like Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and Papua New Guinea, we shared these three conditions where, of course, including Australia in terms of the long coastlines, whereas we have abundant natural resources that can be benefited to the countries. And also the existence of the small-scale fisheries is abundant. Maybe in terms of the numbers, it could be higher than the industrialized fishing vessels. And lastly, of course, the tourism is one of the revenue that can be taken by the country if the marine environment is maintained, clean, and well-being to all of the ecosystem. And then to my current work, based on the desk study and literature review and all of the materials that I have used, I'm trying to update the regulations and the policy specifically to the four littoral countries: Australia, Indonesia, Timor-Leste, and Papua New Guinea. If I may disclaim that this work in progress, I haven't had a chance to make clarification of my findings to the countries such as Australia, Timor-Leste, and Papua New Guinea. And I hope with this forum, I can get a meaningful feedback and response to the relevant authorities or sectors. First, of Australia, up until today, Australia seems to take a very serious IUU fishing as a biggest threat to the fish stock. The Australian Fisheries Management Authority, or the AFMA, act on behalf of the central government, and Australian jurisdiction oversee this issue. In terms of the regulation, Australia is leading in updates the development of its instruments, such as the PSMA. And Australia also make a significant update in terms of the management regulation and the compliance study. Besides updating their national plan of action of IUU fishing, Australia also equipped with national plan on sharks and seabirds. Many strategic plans embedded in the Commonwealth strategy policy also has been updated, such as bycatch and harvest strategy. As for Indonesia, despite there's not that many in the terms of low level update, Indonesia is there to adopt the international plan of action into its national plan of actions. And many supporting regulations in terms of technical and administrative policy has been enacted since 2011 and has made numerous notable changes, such as moratorium of vessel licensing and the establishment of a special task force in combating illegal fishing. Indonesia also ratified the Port State Measured Agreement and enacted the implementation and designation of port regulations. There is some discussion, though, over a revision on the fisheries law that has been conducted by the consortium of the NGOs, in which some of us may know in this forum. And as for the Papua New Guinea, despite that, to our knowledge, there is absence of national plan of action on the IUU fishing. The IUU fishing itself were mentioned in the policies and strategies section, which stated that there is no specific, there is a specific policy to improve the coordination and management of the maritime sector, as it managed through sectoral policies and laws. Cross-cutting issues and competing interests require integrated approaches to the ocean management, in which included in its national ocean policy. This national ocean policy were published for the 2020 to 2030, in which serve as a policy guidance for the ocean governance for PNG. And in addition to that, PNG signed the NIUE Treaty Subsidiary Agreement to the NIUE Treaty on the cooperation in fisheries surveillance and law enforcement to enhance cooperative surveillance and data exchange and enforcement activities. And again, if there is some correction, I'm looking forward to such comments. And lastly, for the TimorLeste, the national fisheries strategy were established to guide Timorese policymakers to enhance its effort to eliminate the IUU fishing. The plan were divided into three terms. The medium term, 2016 to 2020, emphasis on the establishment of financial institution for easier financing access, and developed several key components, namely fish processing technology, mutual benefits, partnership framework, and standardized fisheries production quality. However, the fisheries legislation is still under the revision progress. And it is worth to note that Timor-Leste now developing the surveillance community base that they called as the PESCAS, yeah, and some noted that this is a crucial role for a policy reform in the Fisheries Act. Ladies and gentlemen, if we see from the compliance of the international instruments that only Indonesia and Australia has ratified the Port Agreement, Global Record Initiative, and adopting its national plan of action, in which we are looking forward to the development of Papua New Guinea and Timor-Leste. So that for those the findings, I guess after 2011, Australia has updated its second national plan of action, whereas Indonesia, along with other countries, has established the national plan of action to enhance their effort to combat IUU fishing, whereas Papua New Guinea, Singapore, and Timor-Leste has yet to establish their respective national plan of action. And unfortunately, there's no guidance for sharing data mechanism established by the RPOA IUU as a benchmark for data sharing work plan item. And lastly, our work is try to calculate the IUU fishing loss, in which we try to make the formula based on the volume loss formula and the economic loss formula. We try to make this formula as correct as possible, where we make the assumption of the fish weight equivalent with the number of fishing vessels apprehended for the IUU fishing, and we try to calculate it along with the fishing of the vessel trip annually, and we calculate it with the fish price. So with this kind of formula, we hope that we could get numbers that we can show to the world that this is the economic loss that we can save from the IUU fishing. And this is an ongoing calculation that we try to make a calculation of the 11 members of the RPOA IUU fishing, in which this data is inconclusive because we are still calculating based on the formula. And please kindly, if you have do comments or revision over the formula. And lastly, again, we try still processing inputs for the baseline estimates and also the legal updates for each of the ATS boarding states. And we're still compiling and reviewing methods and data submission of each ATS boarding states and the regional plan of action members to the FAO Global Record Initiative. And lastly, we will try to identify to the enabling condition and challenges for the community-based surveillance of Indonesian practice, POK-WAKMAS, and also the Timor-Leste PES-AT as the best practices that can be, or we thought that can be shared to the world as a best practices in combating IUU fishing in terms of practice that can be followed by other region as well. So hopefully by the end of the project of this consultancy, I will make a fully report of this work. I guess that's all. I'm looking forward for all comments and discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Pak Arie, for such a great presentation on the global issue of IUU fishing. You explained about the significance of why we need to combat IUU fishing from the dimensions of environmental, social, and economic. You also mentioned about the shared interests of countries in the ATS region to combat IUU fishing, along with their progress on law or regulations, also the national plan of actions. And you also highlight about the absence of regional mechanism for sharing data that needs to be established in the future. Thank you again, Pak Arie. Okay, distinguished participants, I would like to remind you again that you still can involved in the quote competition. The quote competition is still open until 10:30 today. So you can post your favorite quote, one or two posts on the social media, on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. Just put the hashtag @ATSEA-2 and the winner will be announced later at the end of the webinar. So now I would like to introduce our second speaker, Dr. Knuckey. So Dr. Knuckey is a fisheries scientist with 35 experience in Australia, Asia, and the Western Pacific. He has high-level knowledge on coastal and offshore fisheries in both temperate and tropical waters. He has been instrumental in establishing fisheries monitoring and observer programs across Australia. Dr. Ian has run numerous fisheries training and capacity building in Australia and Indonesia, and currently he is the director of Fishwell Consulting, a consulting company that encourages and promotes sustainable fishing practices. So today, Dr. Ian will present about ecosystem approach to fisheries management for red snapper fisheries in the ATS region. And once again, I would like to remind you all participants that you can type your question in the Zoom chat box or YouTube live chats during also Dr. Ian's presentation, or you can save your question if you want to ask directly during the Q&A session. Good morning, Dr. Ian. Are you there? Okay.
Yes. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm great. How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Thank you for being here, sir. So, Dr. Ian, you have 20 minutes, and I will notify in the last 2 minutes. Please, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. And thank you very much for your introduction. And also, thanks very much to Arie for an interesting talk on IUU, which relates to fishing, which is what we're talking about here. So I have a presentation on a project that I'm doing with Fishwell Consulting, my company, and Starling Resources. The ink is barely dry on the contract, so I can't give a great level of progress, but we'll talk about what the project is intending to do over the next year or so, and outline particularly what we're going to do with regards to EAFM, ecosystem approach to fisheries management. So I have a presentation here, and I'll go through that. The project team consists of myself and Matt Koopman and Matt Fox from Fishwell Consulting, and also Noah Greenberg from Starling Resources, and his team in Indonesia, Juanita, Noah, and Taufik. And also recently we've contracted Luky from Timor-Leste to be involved in the project as well as an enumerator and coordinator. So basically the team we put together for this project was a combination of Fishwell, who's done a lot of work in fisheries work in Australia and Southeast Asia, and also NOAA's team, Starling Resources, that have people on ground in Indonesia. So we can, in a time of COVID, deal with the problems of limited travel. So we, at the moment, are assuming that there at least be no travel until early next year or March next year. And we are trying to deal with that. And it's not made the project any easier because, as you would know, setting up EAFM is one very much involved in community consultation and in the different countries. So that is making that aspect of the project more difficult. But we're going to use the in-country project team to address that as best we can. So the objectives of our project were to develop an EAFM plan of red snapper in the ATS to underpin the implementation of sustainable fisheries management in the region and in Timor-Leste. To do that, we've got to develop baseline information for red snapper fisheries, which will involve collecting of information from the ATS region and from Timor-Leste about the fisheries that are involved, the biology, population dynamics, economics, and social aspects of those fisheries. Based on this information, which is collected during the first part of the project, we'll develop EAFM plans for red snapper in the region. We'll also be holding training of trainers workshop, and that will be during next year, where we hope to use the NCUs and fisheries managers from each of the regions to develop EAFM standards and procedures best suited to the region. Based in that, we're also developing a rights-based management approach that can be implemented in the region and undertake stakeholder consultations, including with women and socially excluded groups that are typically socially excluded across the region, and ensuring that we have a good cross-section of people involved in this communication. So they're the objectives of our project. And in terms of what we hope to output in about a year's time is the baselines and plans for EAFM in the ATS region and Timor-Leste. So we'll have a training platform, which we originally planned as a face-to-face, but we may develop an online platform to deal with the COVID situation at the moment. But hopefully by then a combination of the two. So we'll have something that remains as a legacy of the project in relation to training of the trainers. And we'll talk about our stakeholder engagement with the regions and the different communities in the different countries. And Matt Fox will be doing a lot of work with the rights-based management approach in the ATS region, and he's done work of this nature in the past. Ultimately trying to get improved institutional arrangements in the future. I think in the discussion and talk by Arie, we can see how difficult it is, even in a single jurisdiction fishery, to manage fisheries, much less managing them across such a broad area with multiple jurisdictions overlaid with the difficulties of IUU fishing. So it is not a small ask. It is the start of what will be a progress towards EAFM. I don't think we can expect to achieve it in a small time in such a complex management regime. So that's why I headed the talk towards, because it is a journey we are on. It's not an end result that we're going to achieve in any short amount of time due to the difficulties of multiple jurisdictions. So what is EAFM and why is it so important to the region? An ecosystem approach to fisheries management is a practical way to implement fisheries management that takes into consideration not just the resource and sustainability of a resource, but also the benefits of a sustainable fisheries to the people involved in those fisheries. So it's joining ecosystem approach to fisheries management. And it's a combination and balancing of the ecological well-being of the ecosystem and the fisheries habitats and fisheries populations that depend on them, and not just the fish, also the protected species and habitats and ecosystems of that, with the human well-being. I think Arie pointed out the huge amount of fishermen or fishers in the region that rely on the resource and how critical that resource is to the ATS region. It is fundamental that we have good management of those regions to support the coastal communities in multiple countries that depend on that. And just the sheer numbers of the resource and the people that depend on them is critical to do that. And to do it in a way that is ultimately going to benefit people in the longer term. It's not a short-term benefit we are talking here, because that is of no use to the communities that depend on them. It's the future generations of the people, it's the future generations of the fish that we are dependent upon for sustainable management. And part of that sustainability relies on having sustainable ecosystems that support those fisheries. And there is a lot of unsustainable practices, not just involved in fishing, though some are, and the issues of climate change, pollution, IUU. There's a whole range of things outside of managed fisheries that can impact on our ability to provide a sustainable resource into the future. So EAFM isn't a new thing. Certainly in Australia, we talk about EBFM, ecosystem-based fisheries management, but it's the same thing. And we've seen over the last decade or two, the movement away, a focus on just target species in fisheries management. We're primarily focusing on the target species and the catches of them, ensuring that's, producing the most fish we can in a sustainable long-term way. Very much driven by the government, not necessarily with a great input from fishers or communities. And what we've seen now is a change over time to where we're not just considering the target species, we are considering the target species and the bycatch associated with that. So most fishing methods, unless it's hand harvest, certainly trawl and longline and fisheries, involve a lot of bycatch that is captured with the target species. So we need to ensure that not just the target species, but all the byproduct and bycatch is caught in a sustainable amount, because it all is involved together as fisheries. You'll also see the increased focus on ensuring that protected species are not overexploited and try to minimise the capture of protected species, dugongs, turtles, whales, dolphins in fisheries. And they can be captured quite easily unless management plans and mitigating procedures are put in place to limit their capture. And ultimately, the fundamental habitats and communities that support the fisheries. Some of these fisheries are pelagic, some are benthic. We need to ensure that the operations that are conducted there are not fundamentally destroying the habitats on which our fish communities depend. And as mentioned before, the threats from external sources such as marine pollution, climate change, other factors that are maybe outside typical fisheries management need to be considered. So what we end up with EAFM is good governance across the areas of the fisheries. So it is no point just one jurisdiction having good governance in a fisheries resource such as red snapper that spans multiple jurisdictions. we need to have management plans across the jurisdictions that work together to have a process and implementation that supports each other in the management of the fishery. So we don't want or need weak links in that management chain. We need to ensure the network of managements across the populations of red snapper are supporting it. We also saw the socio-economic benefits of the fisheries and good management are huge in this region. There are millions of people that depend on a functioning ecosystem and the fisheries resources it supports. So we need integrated management across the sectors and across the jurisdictions. We have multiple fishing methods, we have multiple jurisdictions, we are operating multiple areas of the fishery. They all need to be coordinated and working towards the same end to achieve that. We also need to understand that the potential threats from outside of the fisheries are controlled in a manner that does not degrade the ecosystem and habitats on which these fisheries depend. Red snapper are one of the key resources in this region. It is very important. You see them on every small marketplace around Southeast Asia. You see that red snapper are part of that. It is fundamental resource to the people of that region, from the smallest coastal communities to the large population centres throughout that area. It is a very valuable species that is good to eat, but it's not a quick growing species. It is a species that we need to look after over time to ensure there is good recruitment and sustainability. So what is EAFM? It enables us not to just deal with short-term issues, but to deal with larger scale, longer term issues. So the combined input from multiple jurisdictions and sectors allows us to try and tackle some of the bigger problems facing the habitat and the populations of red snapper in the region. It increases the support for better governance in the region. And from that, we hope to achieve better compliance and enforcement. Arie talked about the importance of community-based governance and community-based compliance in this. This cannot be tackled from a simple high-up approach of top-level government down to it. It depends on community involvement in the management and compliance of the thing and of the resource. And we've seen that starting to develop and the foundations of that occurring in both Indonesia and Timor-Leste, and to a certain extent Papua New Guinea. The value of that is it reduces conflicts, especially between different fishery subsectors. Fisheries don't always work together, and we need to have a shared understanding of the initiatives and the wants and expectations of different sectors and different jurisdictions to understand how those conflicts can be reduced. Also, through a combined approach, it helps us access funding and resources to deal with problems at a larger scale, and therefore foster support from NGOs and different government and funding organisations to achieve the ends we're looking for. So where are we in the EAFM process? We're actually in this project at the very start of it. A lot of it is planning for it, and our project, as you would have seen, is starting to plan for that. So defining and scoping the Fisheries Management Unit, or FMU, is very much where our project is in establishing the baselines. So we're understanding the community involvement, the number of fishes, the types of vessels, the types of gears, the total catches in all the different regions, to understand the fisheries management units we're dealing with very well. And then with input from community consultation, we are hoping to identify the goals and issues and priorities for EAFM in the region, and ultimately develop the EAFM plans for that. So our project, you can see, is focused on steps 1, 2, and 3, and setting up the implementation of EAFM across the region. throughout this, we need to have reality checks with the stakeholders involved to ensure that we are aligned with what people's expectations are. So it's very important, as I mentioned at the start, that we have good fora and good mechanisms for community input into the project. And we'll be working very hard to establish that, even through the difficulties of COVID-19 and us having face-to-face excuse me, meetings with you. So you'll see I'll end this presentation by giving my contact details, because we now have 80, 90 people involved in this webinar alone, and we would appreciate being able to reach out to those people to help with the input and consultation for our project at this early stage. So where are we now? We're at the first stage of fisheries profiling, so collecting baseline information on fisheries management arrangements in the different jurisdictions, what regulations there are, the management plans, and the harvest strategies that may or may not be in place. Information about the vessel type, the fishing locations, and in fact the traceability, the product supply chains that are attached to this, because they're the chains through which the fisheries resources are so important to the communities, either coastal or capital cities. Biological data is a very important part of our assessment process, understanding stock structures, the length and age structure of the populations, abundance indices, if we can get them. Often they're involved in using catch and effort data that might be available, and Matt Koopman will be leading the charge to collect that information and the data available from the different jurisdictions. Understanding if there are special areas of spawning or reproduction that are important, and the population parameters of growth, mortality, reproduction that are fundamental to understanding it. But it's not just the biological data, it's also the economic data that we need to collect to understand the importance of this resource to the region, and also the social information. And that's where Noah and his team will be fundamental to this project in collecting that social and economic data throughout the region, in Indonesia, Timor-Leste, Papua New Guinea, and I'll be involved in that from Australia. So we'll be conducting, depending on the data available, assessment of the status of the stocks to the extent we can, and understanding the issues that places for sustainable utilisation of those fisheries. Also, the conservation issues, as I mentioned, no gear is devoid of having interactions with protected species, but also issues such as marine pollution, climate change, and IUU fishing, as mentioned by Arie, are very important in establishing the full picture that we need to get in these EAFM plans. We'll be looking for data gaps and requirements, and I thank Gerson for his introduction to today's proceedings. And certainly we are looking at the work that's been done in data collection in Timor-Leste, and we have resources available to facilitate that in terms of their enumerators and collecting that information from Timor-Leste, because that is a very important component of this project, where we might collect information on logbook data landings, but also the information that may be available through market information collection on size, age, sex, availability of that information, and revenue. We'll try and collect information on reported interactions with protected or endangered species, but also we're involved in collecting a lot of spatially referenced information, because we're dealing with multiple jurisdictions, but two, because this population extends across a huge area, we need to have spatial references to this information. And Matt Koopman will be collecting a lot of information on the GIS, the geographic information on habitat types, important area like seagrass habitat, mangrove habitat, benthic type, that is very influential in the habitat and productive areas of red snapper in the area. And as I mentioned, collecting population parameters for our local stocks. So we'll be looking towards the future about what opportunities exist to improve the available data for the project. What can we collect to understand snapshots of that population? And how can we collect information on the economic data and conservation issues? And again, Noah and his team from Starling Resources will be instrumental in collecting that during the latter part of the project. Ultimately, we will be building that to scope through the next part of the project, where we will be running the baselines and the EAFM plans over time, and that'll run over the first few months of next year, although there has been a little bit of a lag, as I mentioned, to start the project and how we're going to deal with the COVID issues in that project. And hopefully we'll be working with the Indonesian vessel in a research vessel and collecting some critical information on red snapper during its survey early next year. And we'll have one of our members on that. So there is work collection started and the fishery profiling is underway, and we'll make our first initial report on that to the RSC in the next few weeks. But we'll be focusing over the next month or two on our introduction with the stakeholders, which is why it's so important that we reach out to the people that are on this webinar to provide initial introductions to the work we are doing and begin our discussions about the EAFM objectives. So we want to have really good consultation over the next few weeks across the 4 countries, and we'll be reaching out to people on that. So if people know that they can provide useful information, whether it's data, provision on fisheries profiling, or advice on some of the EAFM goals and objectives, please, they're my contact details. Feel free to reach out either through this process here. I notice there's questions coming in, or directly to myself, and we'd love to be involved and get to reach out to everyone involved there. So on that note, Dinah, I'll thank you. I'll end my presentation and pass it back to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ian. What a complete explanation about ecosystem approach to fisheries management concept. You explained that this concept basically integrate between the ecosystems components and fisheries components. You also highlight about the 5 steps in EAFM. Also, you update the progress of fisheries profiling that you are conducting now. And also you say about the issue of data gaps that need to be addressed in the future. Okay, sir, thank you again. And ladies and gentlemen, before we go to our panelists in the next session, I would like to remind you all that please fill up the attendance list and the questionnaires. The link already shared on the chat box by the committee. So while you're here for the panelists on the next session, you can fill up the attendance list first and also maybe the questionnaire later. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we already have interesting presentations from our 2 amazing speakers. And at present, we also have here with us the 2 panelists who has expertise related to fisheries. The first panelist is Dr. Luky Adrianto, who is the Dean of Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science, IPB University Indonesia. He has been working for more than 20 years in the field of coastal and marine resource management, including fisheries. Currently, he is the co-chair for the National Working Group on ecosystem approach to fisheries management Indonesia, and he obtained his PhD in marine and environmental science from Kagoshima University, Japan. So now I would pass on to Pak Luky to provide feedbacks to our speakers. Hello, Pak Luky.
Yes, thank you, Dinah.
Yes,
Can you hear my voice, right?
Yes, very clear. You have 10 minutes, Pak Luky. Please.
Yes, thank you. I will make a comments as fast as I can. I would like to share to make a bit systematic way to have a comment. So thank you for Pak Handoko, Pak Gerson, Ibu, all of the PMOs of the SC2 for giving me opportunity to ask the comments, giving comments to the Pak Arif and Pak Ian's presentation. I would like to congratulate to all of the expert that has been presented, presenting the topics of today's sustainable fisheries at the ATS. I'm Luky Adrianto from IBB University, Faculty of Fisheries and Marine Science. To start with the comments, I would like to mention this because Pak Arif and Pak Ian actually talking about the sustainable fisheries within the frames of this 10 target of SDG 14. For example, Pak Arif mentioned about the 14.4 for how to ensuring or combating the IUU fishing and at the same times we have to then strengthen our platform to strengthen the LRR fisheries. And Pa Ian actually mentioning about all of the aspects of the ecosystem services, ecosystem approach to the fisheries. And I think with the 334 target of this, all about of SDGs 14 especially is actually sustainable fisheries. So this is the framework that both Pa Ian and Pa Arif very good starting to how to mention the achievement of SDG 14, for example, for the context of ATS. This is the first thing that I would like to give general comments of to the Pa Arif and Pa Ian. For Pa Arif, I think I should give this screen to make a bit clear. For Pa Arif, I don't have much comment except this, Pa Arif. As I understood, the IUU is actually comprising into the three aspects of the fisheries. First is illegal, unreported, and unregulated. So you mentioned a bit on the context of illegal more than others. And I think as also Professor Daniel Pauli, for example, our mentors also, all of the fishery science, he actually knows him very well. Actually, the unreported and unregulated is a bit less counted in the context of IUU fishing. So my understanding on this is that if you can also, even for example in this study you focus on illegal things, I think for the context of the ITS, maybe we have something like overview on especially unreported and unregulated to tackle of these three loss. So you mentioned already the biomass loss opportunities. For example, fishing don't affect because then there is no regulation, there is no reporting. So the size of fish caught by the fishermen, for example, is a bit less than others. Then the biomass loss opportunity is the risk of the IUU. But then economic loss that you mentioned already in your formula is also part of this economic overfishing. But then the economic loss coming from the unreported and unregulated also perhaps a bit was that more investigated. I have a study with my master student, for example, to study the economic loss of unreported, because in Indonesia, a lot of the small scale fisheries actually unreported. And was that the things that we can do is that how to calculate, for example, the loss of this. Even though for this time of the study, Pa Arif, you mentioned on the context of the economic loss from the illegal fishing, and also social loss, Pa Arif, because you taught me a lot about the risk of the IUU fishing from the context of social capital loss, social conflicts, crimes, and others very also have to be tackle in the context of this IUU. In that context, then fisheries governance missing in these four countries, I just make a bit was that a self justification or self investigation. For example, that for Australia, this three is well connected or well articulated, at least in the context of the legal perspective, as you presented today. But for Indonesia, for example, the unreported is less than the other two, illegal and unregulated. But for the Papua New Guinea and Timor-Leste, Aleixo maybe later on can explain more, is a bit like this. So illegal is more than the other two. So I think this is a very important, even not this time of study, but for the ATS, we should have a more complete or comprehensive analysis on the IUU fishing. For Pak Arif, thank you. For Pak Ayen, I think I personally congratulate to your team to start with this EAFM planning. I believe that for Indonesia, for example, or Timor-Leste, reported by FAO, the numbers of EAFM practices is a bit increasing, compared at least, for example, with the say Africa countries. Some positive trend, even though there's still less than other area if the context of this EAFM practices. And anyway, the ideas of to start with EAFM planning for the region is very in time in the context of this. Second one, I would like to also complete the ideas of your thinking about EAFM. It's not just only EM and FM, but my personal opinion is that we should also incorporate the context of, say, ecosystem-based management and co-management, because actually the EAFM itself is actually how to make ecosystem health, but in the same time, we also consider the stakeholders, the participatory of the stakeholders to ensure that the ecosystem health of the ecosystem is also contribute to the welfare of the people. So I also propose the other things that ecosystem approach should be also combined with the fisheries co-management in terms of that we also consider the right of the users of the fisheries system itself. In this regard, I would like also to perhaps introduce the Indonesian cycle of the EAFM planning. Of course, I agree, and all of us also learning about the 5 steps of the EAFM cycle that you just presented, and all of us actually also agree with that. But for the Indonesian case, we a bit modify that we put adoption as a part of the just end of the planning. So because in our context, the planning should be done, and then after that finished by the adoption before then implementation and evaluating. So I think this is the things that in our case we start with this assessment, as you do. You now doing the profiling and assessment, and then after that we know about the how ecosystem approach of our Arafura and Timor-Leste region, and then after that I believe the methodology that you will use put in the context of action fisheries improvement program and put in the planning. And for Indonesia, for Papua New Guinea, and for Timor-Leste as well, perhaps Australia, then put in the context of adoption. That's the things that maybe you will discuss with your team and your colleagues of the country representative to do the adoption stage of this planning. The second things that I would like to also discuss with you is that perhaps the snapper is share stock in my understanding. In this context of that, this is very important to also discuss in terms of EAFM science, that international EAFM is very important to be discussed. Because in our context, Timor-Leste, Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia, and red snapper, we understood very well that as part of the share stock, especially between Indonesia and Australia, for example, that's also part of the challenge of ecosystem approach of fisheries co-management planning. So how this ecosystem can be conducted in the context of governance mechanism between two countries, because actually this EEZ of R is actually divided to the share stock of this red snapper. That's why that Pak Arif maybe can also join with this kind of consultation regarding to the international fisheries of this red snapper. So this is the thing that I haven't yet seen in your presentation regarding to this, how we deal with the context of international quote unquote regimes of the share stock, especially with the red snapper. And last but not least, I would like to also perhaps for Ian and team to focus on also the sharing responsibility, Pak. Because you know that after we make a planning for the region, for the implementation, I believe that back to the country's quote unquote authorities, and then how then the sharing responsibility mechanism, as we learn from the large marine ecosystem experience. I did my governance assessment for the South Sea last 5 years ago. I understand that actually they also include Philippines, Malaysia, and Indonesia. So we also have some experience on that. So I think the most challenges of this ecosystem approach of co-management is actually the sharing responsibilities of the countries and the sharing responsibilities between the government and the community within respective countries to the context of implementation. So I think even though Ian, I understood that your study is finished with the planning, but during the study, I would like to suggest that also discuss about how the mechanisms of implementation regarding to the effective planning, because planning without implementation actually is not the planning itself. So I think that will be much more discussion on how to make implementation strategy with effectively will be done by the respective countries. Thank you very much, Pak Arif and Pak Ian, for getting some lesson learned from the next activities for your AFM and legal studies. And I believe that based on our two studies, the sustainability of the fisheries, especially in the area, will be ensured in the future. Thank you very much, Pak Handoko, Pak Bu Casey, and others, and also Bu Dinah for the moderators. And I'm back the times to you. Sorry for the big overtime for this comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the feedbacks and comments, Pak Luky. Very insightful. I hope that we can use this for the future of the ATSEA-2 project. Okay, for our speaker panelists, it's supposed to be Mr. Aleixo Amaral. He is the Vice Director. Oh, okay. Yay, you're back.
I'm here now.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to introduce you first, Mr. Alex. Okay. So Mr. Alex is the Vice Director of Department of Fisheries and Marine Science, Faculty of Agriculture, National University of TimorLeste. He is also the national focal point for CTI-CFF TimorLeste in 2009 until 2012. He is also the National Project Team Leader and Finance Manager for Coastal and Marine Resource Management for the Coral Triangle of the Pacific during the time of 2012 until 2015. So we are very glad that you can make it, Mr. Alex. Okay, you there? Oh, okay, you're still there. Okay. So
yeah, I'm here. Good morning, you all. Sorry for late.
Good morning. Okay. You have 10 minutes to provide feedbacks to our speakers. Mr. Alex, please.
Well, thank you for the time and inviting me to give some comment for the presentation. As I sent my PowerPoint before, I'm really glad that to start sustainable fisheries with three main component that the speaker already mentioned there. I just more emphasize on, for example, in the first slide or second slide after my name, that could you please for the second slide? Well, here, for example, for the ecological well-being, when we are talking about like red snapper management, we can say that the single species management, but we also think to the multiple species management, for example, like reef fish or demersal fish. In our context now, we try to start with the ICM context, integrated coastal management. Then last few years, we try also in Timor-Leste to start with LMMA, locally managed marine area. Then we think that through those management system, let's say we can open and close season for the local context, for example, for the spawning time and growing time and so on. Well, out of that, move to the ocean, the idea that we should think about joint marine management area for the transboundary. We are talking about 2 or 3 countries adjacent, probably the idea that we should start with joint marine management area. In this context, like CTI and then PEMC already raised that, like seascape and so on. But through the ATSEA, if we can come through the context of the joint marine management area, probably in the future we can manage those species that we are talking about. Then when we would like to conserve, to sustain single species or multiple species, multi-species, we also think about the habitat protection. For example, MPA, we can adapt it, like in Timor-Leste, we have our customary law regarding to natural resources conservation. We can adapt to coastal and marine management and conservation system. For example, what we call Tarabandu in Timor-Leste, the traditional or customary system that protect and conserve natural resources. As I know, when I was in Maluku, I hear that in Maluku Tenggara especially, they have a sasi laut, which related to the management or related to the conservation or protection about natural resources, especially for the fisheries resources. That's why this really, the speaker really raised the key point related to the sustainable fisheries. Move to the human being. My first comment here is local community. The reason why local community, because they are the one who use the resource in the area. For example, when we are talking about single species or red snapper management or how to sustain them, probably we can encourage to the local people to know that these resources are for you. You are the owner, you are the user. It is for our well-being, especially for the local people. But sometimes when we have our resources related to the market, a common issue here, for example, in Timor-Leste, is related to the market. Some fishers and fish farmers complain that when we have our product, when we have our fish, we don't have our market. Where should we sell our product? That's why I raise here to sustain the fisheries. Lastly, when they have fish, they also think about where they should sell their product. Well, and in the government's part, please move to next slide. Well, again, my first bullet point here, I raised that the local wisdom. The reason why, for example, start from our case here in Timor-Leste, we have our custom, we have our tradition, which exists since long time, and local communities still adopt this system to manage, to conserve, to protect the resources, for example, coastal and marine. And then second bullet, I raised it, the co-management. When we would like to manage and sustain the resources, should balance with or between local or community with the other resource users like civil society or government itself or partners itself. I wrote here that if in the future for the sustainable, we guarantee community-based organization involved in the fisheries management to sustain the resources. After that, from my point of view, legal framework should be clear. For example, when we are talking about protected area or MPA, for example, marine protected area, government should decree or should put on the act. Like here in Timor-Leste, we have a ministerial diploma, for example, for protected species, and the other one for the minimum size, and related to the like industrial, we are talking about the total allowable catch. How big, what amount that given to the respective company or civil society would like to export or to use the resources. And the other point also, national and regional IUU Fishing Action Plan. As I know that Timor-Leste involved in the IUU system, for example, through CTI, as I know through regional plan of action for IUU Fishing, even though in the implementation period, yeah, we know that it depends on the situation in each area or in each country. Then I wrote there that for me, we should avoid destructive fishing practices. To ban for the destructive fishing practices should clear on act, or government or authority should decree for the prohibited of destructive fishing practices in each area, even how back to the, as I mentioned earlier, for the joint management, for example, joint marine management area, how joint decree or joint act to burn, to prohibit it or to decrease even sometimes destructive fishing practices. For example, here in Timor-Leste, based on our fisheries decree law, we totally burn fishing with trawl net. Whatever activity or net, the operation system as a trawl, we burn here based on our fisheries law. So the totally trawl prohibited in Timor-Leste as an example for the destructive fishing practices. Well, back to monitoring. How to monitor whether it's progress or failed. I think, for my opinion, fishers is the number one, because they are the daily or time to time, they spend the time on the beach or on the marine area for fishing. So they are monitored daily for the monitoring system for the fisheries activity in the ocean, and the scientists for the study to support scientific data for the resources. Well, another issue here, that data management. I involved with CTI for a few years, but data management sometimes quite difficult from one country to another. For example, when we are talking about that data sharing, sometimes very difficult to come with one conclusion for the data sharing, because in each country, data management and data sharing, they have their own national or domestic arrangement for the data sharing. Sometimes can be difficult to the scientist itself or the monitoring itself, because the data, it is quite difficult to share among respective country, for example, among Arafura and Timor-Leste countries. Well, it is common for our reason is law enforcement. Like, for example, in Timor-Leste, we have our fisheries inspector. Since independence, we have our fisheries inspector. Even though on the implementation on the ground, it's quite difficult, because support system for the inspection itself. That's why last few years come up with like a Coast Guard or a group to have a look regularly in the coastal area. I think that my comment related to the speaker presentation is very excellent. That's why I just add my comment how we can implement in each country. Well, just a last comment for those presentation. For example, I wrote here that the sustainable fisheries can be guaranteed through following action, like avoid overfishing. How to avoid overfishing? All experts know that in each country, in each region, a fishing quota for industrial fishing. Sometimes we have discussed with community, but sometimes community also say that, well, we are small things, we will collect from the resources, but when industry comes, they will explore, they will collect, they will wipe all our resources here. That's why fishing quota is very important. And the other one, open and close of the fishing area. If when that scientific data, when support for the spawning time or spawning season, I guess that we should do the open and closed season area.
Mr. Alex,
or spawning
sorry.
season.
Can you speed it up, Mr.
When
Alex?
we are talking about sustainable fisheries. And the second one, my last comment is burning, the destructive fishing practices. Whatever practice that will destroy or destructive the resources, we should burn it. We should stop it from our region. And the number three, combating IUU fishing. For me, it's it's a common issue in the region, even in the local area. But let me classify international and international IUU fishing. Even though from my point of view, IUU is not deal with international company or foreigners will come to another country territory. But nationally, how to combat? Because some communities, some fishers, they illegal practice there, but they don't want to say that they are illegal there. How to put on the ground illegal fishing in context of the national and then international? Because sometimes we just burn international company or fishing vessel just come to one territory, but I don't hear in country, they are talking about illegal fishing for themselves. Well, that's why I raise my point here. And then fourth one, habitat protection. And then raise the sense of belonging. Because sometimes they are the user, they are the one who use the resources, but the sense is they just use it. But how to sustain them? It is, I think, we will encourage them. Apply ecosystem-based management. Again, clear legal framework and the rigorous law enforcement in this region. I think this is a last comment, but I said at my closing, could you move to the very last slide? Can move to, well, I just close my word that fisheries resource users, like a fishers, community and the government are the key to guarantee sustainability of fisheries. So my very last word that when everybody, every single person, entity, they have responsible for the resources, sustainable of the fisheries will be guaranteed in the future. I think that's the very last comment for my comment or point of view. Back to audience. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comprehensive inputs, Mr. Alex. And since Pa Arie has to go at 11 o'clock, so I would like to ask Pa Arie first to give response to our panelists, maybe just a brief response before you go, so you can also answer maybe 1 or 2 questions from the participants. Please, Pa Arie, the time is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Mbak Dinah, and my apology to all of you because I have to go at 11. However, I really thank to Pak Luky and Pak Aleixo for their very informative and insightful comments. And especially Pak Luky, I thank you very much for pointing out about the unreported and unregulated. The thing is, me and my team have these difficulties in managing the data and also on how we calculate the unreported and unregulated. However, I found that you and your master student have this research. Maybe we can have a special session on that, so we can discuss further on this. And I'm really much looking forward for you and your student to work together, and especially for the policy in terms of the unreported. Indeed, I agree with you. The difficulties is about the implementation on how we can ensure that this reporting system is effective on the ground. We know already that so many effort trying to make this reporting system for the fishers to report their catch. However, with the lack, with the less landing sites, and also about the disciplines in reporting the data, it plays so much role in this kind of reporting system. And as for Pa Aleixo, I do agree with you. The local wisdom is very important. That is why one of the my work is on identifying the local wisdom that can be shared throughout the region and maybe around the world. Yeah. However, in terms of having a joint act in terms of criminalizing destructive fishing, I guess it really indeed a good idea. However, in the end, it comes back again on the national implementation. I guess the national implementation is very much depend on several factors, such as the capacity and capability of the law enforcement, and also the on how the law itself will be placed in which level of each of the country. Sometimes, if we do only work on the, let's say, in the ministerial or even lower regulation, it makes it ineffective in terms of the implementation. However, I do agree that to make the combating of IUU fishing even more effective, the littoral states have this common and standardized law or regulation. And indeed, I do agree with you about the data sharing is very challenging, and especially with the coordination. And as for your last comments, I do uh, agree everything, and I will take notes on every comments of yours into my report and further develop on that one. Thank you, Pak Luky and Pak Aleixo. And as for the question, Pak Jawadin, as you mentioned that how is the ATSEA-2 project play a role in managing the conservation of WPP 718 in Merauke and Arafura? With an updated baseline estimate loss of the IUU fishing, it will provide a solid base to review the law and policy towards the relevant area. And in addition to that, the review result of the law and regulation, it will make some basis of the revision so that the policymakers can have a better understanding and a better policy to make this kind of changes. And as for Pak Zainal from LIPI, the picture that I have presented for the ATS, it's taken from the or what do you call it, the fishing record, and this is based on the period of time, and we are still waiting for a more accurate data from the Barata, or we call it a Balai Research Observasi Laut from the KKP, and hopefully with all of the data that provided a more formal and more accurate, so that we can have a more a clearer picture of the activities in that area. And lastly, from Dita, is it possible to develop standardized law enforcement in the sub-regional ATS? Indeed, the ATS littoral countries have annual meeting sub-regional the RPOA, and they do share findings of surveillance result and coordinate law enforcement. Nevertheless, as I mentioned to Pak Aleixo, a standardized law enforcement is heavily depend on each of the state, including the capacity and capability of the state. What we can do is that we always work together and try to meet and help each other to let's say to level up the capacity and the capability, so that if we want to talk about some level, then we can talk in a very reasonable level in this cooperation. I guess that's all my comments and answer. And again, apologize for my very limited time, but I do thankful for every comments and question, and I will do take notes for my ongoing research, and hopefully I can result in a better future. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Pak Arie, for your brief but very clear answers and comments to all the questions. Actually, we still have some questions for you, but since you have to go, maybe anyone who would like to discuss directly with you, is it possible, maybe? So the committee can share the contact of Pak Arie maybe later. So thank you again, Pak Arie, for your time. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for answering all the questions, super clear. So now, ladies and gentlemen, we will move on to the comments from our second speaker, Dr. Ian. Please to provide feedback, to respond to feedback from the panelists. Dr. Ian, the time is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much, Pak Luky and Aleixo, for your comments and insights into our project. I suppose as a general overarching comment, I I'll point out that it is a one-year project in probably what is a decadal process. So in terms of the process of implementation, it's very much about the involvement and commitment of the different governments and governance arrangements towards this commitment. So it needs very open and transparent input into that, but to buy on from all governments, or to achieve what we're setting out requires that commitment, a cross-governmental commitment. And Pak Luky, I know you mentioned, all the transboundary issues that we haven't covered that, but I suppose every time I mentioned multi-jurisdiction, I was referring to the fact that we are different jurisdictions with multiple boundaries, and if we don't have management that is collectively advantageous across them, then there is a transboundary issues. But nevertheless, I think we would benefit from talking to you individually, particularly about for example, the Sulawesi sub-regional EAFM and what worked there and what was potential there. So maybe offline we can talk about some of those things that can work. Both of the speakers mentioned about co-management and how we address that. I've worked a lot in co-management fisheries, and to me the word there that is critical to the success of co-management is empowerment. We have potentially the smallest coastal communities trying to do their best to protect and exploit their fisheries up to the highest level control from governments. Now, unless there's an empowerment of those coastal communities to achieve what is expected of them, it is very difficult for them to step up into the shoes of co-management. So the overarching governments and government agencies that deal with fisheries management needs to allow an appropriate amount of empowerment of these coastal and small communities. And I noticed a lot of the questions in the chat relate to how do you deal with those small communities? How do they deal with these issues? They need to feel the empowerment from either their local municipalities or sub-regions that they can do something about that. And obviously within the terms and resources of our project, we can't get out to the individual communities, but we can certainly set out the framework under which empowerment of those communities enables them to deal with EAFM at a community-based level. Because unless that is allowed, it's going to be very difficult for them. And also in response to Aleixo, yes, there are a lot of tools such as TAC, such as closed areas, a lot of management tools available in the suite of tools we can use, but we need to work out the ones that are most appropriate for the different levels of management, because small coastal communities will obviously not be able to manage high-level TACs at industrial level, but they can potentially manage surveillance, small level or coastal closed areas and their management. And as to whether they will be the first eyes or the first information we get, yes, they can. But again, we have to enable and empower them to collect that level of information. From my work with fishermen at both small level and high level, unless they're rewarded with seeing how their information is used in a management framework and they get that back to themselves, they run out of energy fairly quickly if they don't see the reward for doing that. So we need to develop systems that are both rewarding in terms of their involvement and also seeing the results of their involvement in broader management if we are to engender a responsibility and an ongoing commitment from those fishers or from the local community to get involved. And that is something that takes time, it takes trust, and it takes a willingness and empowerment of those communities to get involved. So yes, the integrated coastal management and the local marine management areas and joint marine management areas are important tools we have, along with potentially TACs and higher level things that can be used there. But we need to work out which aspects of these belong in the realm of the coastal, small coastal communities and small coastal fisheries, and which ones will have our multi-jurisdictional or our transboundary, our national governments step up and work in collaboration to have an overarching management regime for these fisheries. So I agree with both of the comments, and we need to look at that in terms of how we will achieve what we want to set up in our project. I think we can set up ideas for implementation. I think the commitment to implementation rests with the overarching government's commitment to the goals and objectives of EAFM, and then the community, at the community level, the empowerment of those communities to do their job in those roles. So without getting too much into detail, I agree that we need to tackle them and we need to start setting out the plans for them. But I think we need to put our project in context of really the decadal objective here in achieving this. And it is no small pathway we're stepping out with on this project. Thank you, Dinah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ian, for your comments on the feedbacks from the panelists. And on the chat box, we already have some questions for you. So since it's already 11 o'clock, so maybe I will just read one or two questions for you, so you can directly answer the questions. So the first question is, it's from Pak Aryo Damar. Do you have an example on how to show the real evidence to local government as well as local community that doing fisheries management through EAFM is more beneficial rather than only traditional fisheries management? Maybe you can answer directly, Dr. Ian?
Yes, it is a difficult process, and as I sort of alluded to, it's one that needs to be supported by the government levels higher up than those communities. Traditional ecological knowledge or traditional approaches can be supported, but they need to align with the overarching goals and be empowered by the overarching fisheries management agencies to support them. So they do have a place, a very important role, because ultimately they are the eyes and ears and mouths of the local communities that will try and enable long-term sustainable processes. But again, unless they are supported from higher up, they will feel unable to do that. They will not feel supported. And Pak Ario, they will not then commit to longer term. They'll feel like they're beaten and not listened to. So again, the reward mechanism has to be there, where the regional or jurisdictional level supports that, and they can understand that they are making a difference and seeing a reward at their area. It doesn't take much of a problem to make people think they are ineffective in achieving their traditional local management of resources, for them to sort of want to give up. A reward and an empowering system needs to be there for them to do that. So it is so important that they get that support to do that. And that has to come from each level above them. I hope that answers your question, Pak Ario.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Knuckey. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ian, for the answers. And before we move to another question, I would like to invite Mr. Pedro Rodriguez from Timor-Leste, who would like to share his insights. Mr. Pedro, are you there? Mr. Pedro Rodriguez? Okay, while we are waiting for Mr. Pedro, maybe we can move on to the next question for Dr. Ian.
Yes,
okay.
I'm here.
Oh, Mr. Pedro, all right. Okay.
Okay.
Please.
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I have some comment in regard with the Arie presentation. And just to make clear that law number 12 on fishing related offenses 2004 it was revoked already. So right now we are using the penal code. So this is for Arie. And the second point in regard with the Arie presentation about the update regulation and policy in Arafura Timor Sea region. So my question is, because when we compare with our condition, especially from the fisheries legislation and other related legislation in our country, when we compare with Indonesia, PNG, and Australia, it's something that is very, very far away from us. So to update the regulation in the Arafura Timor Sea region, what practical recommendation that you will recommend
Mr. Pedro. Mr. Pedro, I think you have technical issue. Okay. Okay, Mr. Pedro, maybe. Okay, I think you have the network issue. Maybe the committee can mute Mr. Pedro first. Okay, thank you. And let's move on. Maybe while we are waiting for Mr. Pedro, we can also address another question to Dr. Ian. So Ian, here is the question from Dulce Nascimento Victor. He's asking about what is the best way to balance the ecosystem with the increasing demand of fishing and the growth of fishing industry. Maybe just a brief answer, Dr. Ian, please.
Yes, the critical issue here is population growth of people compared to population growth of fish. When you have nations with coastal communities of many millions of people, depending on a finite fisheries resource, there does need to be some alternatives available, because once we start limiting, recognizing the limits, and there are limits, we've learned that in nearly every overexploited stock, and we've seen that start in this region. We need to be able to provide communities with alternatives to wild caught seafood that are sustainable for them and practical for them, because when it comes down to the choice of food for my family and sustainable fisheries, most people would choose food for their family first unless there is an alternative. So it is going to be a difficult issue when you have such a highly populated coastal community that is almost, well, it's critically dependent on seafood for their sustenance and for their livelihood. So it becomes a bigger issue than just fisheries management, and that's where well-being of communities coincides with the sustainable fisheries. that is the critical point that needs to be dealt with and goes well beyond, I suppose, just fisheries management, but it's ensuring sustainable living standards for our coastal communities that at the moment are so critically dependent. So it points to the fact that we have to have sustainable fisheries first to support these communities as best we can, but we need alternative protein sources and food sources if populations are going to continue to grow, where the fisheries populations dealing with climate change and overexploitations are unlikely to. Simple to be said, very difficult to actually put into practice.
Okay, yes, I totally agree with you. It's very simple in theory, yeah, but very difficult and challenging in practice. Okay, I think our time is already over as we planned. It's supposed to be finished at 11, but since we have a lot of questions, it's very dynamic. So now it's already 11:15. So maybe I would like to ask another. Okay, no. Okay, we have no time anymore. So now we're gonna move to our next agenda. But before, I would like to thank you again to our speakers, Pak Arie already left, and then to Dr. Ian, to our panelists, Pak Luky, Mr. Alex, thank you very much for your very interesting discussion. Thank you. And ladies and gentlemen, we will go to the session that you're already waiting for. I believe it's the quiz session. So we will have two questions. So I'm gonna read the question first, and then I will count 1, 2, 3 and say go. Right after I say go, you can type your answer on the chat box, and the fastest one who answer correctly will be the winner, and there will be prize for the winner. Okay, are you ready? Okay, okay. The first question, I think it's from Pak Arie presentation. So among 4 ATS countries, which countries have participated in FAO Global Record Initiative? 1, 2, 3, go. Oh, okay, okay. Some people already answer. Okay, yes, we have the first one who is the fastest one, Pak Aryo Damar. The answer is Indonesia and Australia. Thank you, Pak Aryo. Congratulations. The committee will contact you very soon about the prize. And we still have the second question. Are you ready? Okay, it's gonna be easier. It's from Ian presentation. How many steps are in the ecosystem approach to fisheries management? 1, 2, 3, go. How many steps at EAFM? Okay, all right. We see the answers coming through. Oh, it's my dear friend, Pak Wawan. Pak Wawan, congratulations. You are the winner for the second question. Congratulations. The committee will contact you very soon about the prize. Okay. So that's all for the quiz. Congratulations again for the winners. You'll get the exclusive merchandise from the ATSEA project. And right after this, I will invite Ms. Liris from the ATSEA Regional Project Management Unit to give information about our quote competition. Please, Ms. Liris.
Hi, yes, thank you. So I'd like to announce to all participants that we are extending our quote competition until tomorrow. So please submit your favorite quote from the speakers or the panelists from all the previous days and also from today. Or you can write your own review on this webinar series on your own Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter account. And you can use the hashtag #ATSEA-2. Make sure that your post is set on public so that we're able to see your quote. And we will announce 4 winners tomorrow afternoon for the best quotes and most likes. If you have any questions, feel free to send a private message to our account or any of our social media platforms. You can find links to our social media at the bottom of our website page, and our website is atsea-program.com. Okay, that's it, and good luck to everybody.
Thank you, Liris, for the information about the extension of the quote competition. So everyone still have the chance to post their favorite quotes and win the prize. Okay, I think we're already at the end of our webinar today. So I would like to call on Pak Iwan Kurniawan, the NRI Manager of UNDP Indonesia, to deliver the closing remarks. Please, Pak Iwan. Okay, Pak Iwan, you can start. Pak Iwan, we couldn't hear your voice.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Okay, yes, it's clear. Go on, Pak.
Yeah, thank you, Dinah. Yeah, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It is my great pleasure being with you all today, seeing you in a good condition, healthy. And please let me introduce myself. I'm Iwan Kurniawan, Program Manager for the Natural Resource Management Cluster at the Environment Unit, UNDP Indonesia. I respect representative of the ATSEA-2 member countries from Indonesia, Timor-Leste, PNG, and Australia, as well as for the all inspired speaker, panelists, moderator, PMC colleague, project team, and our value webinar participant. On behalf of UNDP, I would like to express highly appreciation to all of you in sharing latest knowledge, study result, innovative ideas, and strategic recommendation, as well as fruitful discussion to better understanding of the Arafura Timor Sea's large marine ecosystem and action needed to build a better the rich resources area. Ladies and gentlemen, there are 4 thematic discussions that have been organized in the last 4 days. One is about regional governance mechanism and stakeholder collaboration. On the second day, we have climate change and marine and land-based pollution, and then continued with the marine biodiversity protection on the third day. And today, the last of the webinar series is about sustainable fisheries. The organizing committee reported the webinar are attended by 95 to 125 people from each session for different background and 14 countries from Asia, Pacific, Australia, US, Canada, Netherlands, and Saudi Arabia, which is amazing. And congratulations to all of you, particularly Pak Handoko and team. And ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to take several important points from the discussion. One is related with the consideration in establishing of the ATS, Arafura and Timor Sea's governance mechanism, including Sustainable Partnership Forum. There is a strong country buy-in and also support from key partner and stakeholder from local, national, and regional, as well as the international level, which is the successful keys for establishing the ATS governance. And we also understand there is a different socioeconomic, cultural, and political situation of the ATS countries, as well as the similarities and key motivation that bind the region need to be considered. Clear, concrete, and realistic goals and timetable are important for success of the mechanism as well as the financial support sustainability. On the second day, we discussed about the adaptation to the climate change and better handling of the marine and land-based pollution. I note there is two points. One is about a community-based adaptation strategy that will be developed with reference to the result of the climate change vulnerability assessment. There is also information that a guidance toolkit and also communication product will be developed to support that. And the second point is about there is a limited data and information on oil spill and marine debris magnitude in the ATS and the pollution sources. The initial analysis pointed on the importance of developing a cooperation on oil spill preparedness and response among the ATS region and a marine debris survey network in the region. I think this is the key point that need to be followed up soon, maybe next year. On the third day, related with the effective marine biodiversity protection, we noted that the challenges are still there to achieve management effectiveness of the marine protected area. By understanding direct benefit of the MPA and also MPA network is the key point to attract support as well as engage the key stakeholder. And it is also recommended to have more practical and implementable the marine turtle conservation action plan. And today we learned about from the expert about the promoting sustainable fisheries. How about managing and assessing unreported and unregulated data, which is still an issue for us due to the reliability of the collecting the data as well as the lack of awareness of the actor in providing the data. Second, we need the enabling policy and legal frameworks, acknowledgement of local wisdom and law enforcement. Third, the important to the effective implementation of the ecosystem approach to fisheries management by piloting for shared stock red snapper fisheries, highlighting sharing responsibility of the relevant countries. And last, establishing and strengthening the system to monitor fishing quota for the industrial fishing, which is also doable to be piloting to this project. Ladies and gentlemen, UNDP is continuing the commitment to promote nature-based solution in addressing development challenges in the region, and this is only the start. So, with my deep respect, I would be grateful to work with all of you and encourage everyone to explore effective and appropriate intervention to demonstrate a healthy ecosystem of the Arafura Timor Sea for sustainable development. I hope we can run through this webinar series and further take relevant roles to realize our big expectation in sustaining rich marine and biodiversity resources for a better life, biodiversity and ecosystem conservation. It is our responsibility to create future prosperity of the ATS region for the current and next generation. So again, I thank you so much for your enthusiasm and taking time out of your busy duties to attend the 4 days webinar series. And I invite you to become the new SPF member, Stakeholder Partnership Forum member. And lastly, I would like to say big appreciation to Mas Andoko and the team for the great arrangement of this event. See you all in the next interested event in 2021. Terima kasih, obrigado. Thank you for your attention. Over to you, Dinah.
Thank you, Pak Iwan, for the closing remarks. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is the end of our webinar series. Thank you again for all speakers and panelists. Also to everyone who joined us from Monday until today. Thank you all for your active participation. I hope that you all find this webinar series interesting and useful. It's been my pleasure to hosting today's webinar. I'll see you next time and please stay safe, everyone. Bye-bye.